We have made significant progress in negotiating our exit by agreeing the terms of a time-limited implementation period and locking down entire chapters on the financial settlement and citizens' rights. Negotiations are ongoing. My officials are in Brussels this week discussing a number of issues. These include issues in the agreement such as Euratom, data and intellectual property rights, discussions on the future partnership and how we progress future economic partnership, and how we progress those negotiations swiftly and in parallel. Also this week, Northern Ireland, particularly human rights and state aid and to some extent agriculture have been amongst the discussion. And today, my officials are in Brussels discussing the future security partnership.
If the eventual will of Cabinet and the Prime Minister is to seek a custom arrangement with the EU, will he resign?
I'm not sure quite whether it's constitutional to discuss my resignation, Mr. Speaker, but the simple, and I don't take it to be imminent, I should say that. The simple truth is that this is a complex and important issue. It will affect the future of our country generations into the future. It has direct effect on the sensitive issue of Northern Ireland and the peace process there, which we are committed to protect at all costs, and so there's no surprise that it takes some time to absolutely nail down this policy.
We want full access to Galileo, including the crucial secure elements that will help guide British missiles should they be needed to keep us all safe. This is a commercial matter for Airbus, so it would be inappropriate for me to comment. But what I can say is that the government has been in close contact with them and will continue to work with the entire UK sector to do with space, to do all we can to ensure that the UK continues to be able to continue and contribute fully to the Galileo programme.
Ministers fully understand and recognise that fishing is of totemic importance to not just the fishing community but the UK as a whole, going way beyond its contribution to GDP. We take that forward, that knowledge forward, as we go into these negotiations, working to deliver that status as an independent coastal state with all that entails.
Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding what the Minister has just said and his colleagues have repeated many times, there are lingering doubts amongst the fishing community in my constituency in neighbouring Grimsby. Can he give an absolute assurance that there will be no further concessions?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend and indeed my honourable friend for Banff and Buchan are both fierce champions of the fishing cause, and I'm sure that they will continue to hold us to account. What I would say to them is that the government fully understands and recognises this totemic importance of fishing. We will take that understanding forward to negotiations as we work to become an independent coastal state, and I very much look forward to my colleagues on this side of the House, perhaps one day, standing here as fisheries ministers, themselves operating our own independent fishing policy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know my honourable friend, the Minister, will recognise that the common fisheries policy has been a disaster for the South West fishing industry over the last 45 years, and it's declined to the point that even if quotas were repatriated, we probably couldn't actually use them. Can he reassure me that in his discussions with his colleagues, he's making sure that we will actually rebuild the industry and provide support to do that, to ensure that when powers are repatriated, we can actually take advantage of them?
Mr. Speaker, we will certainly work to take advantage of new powers as they're repatriated. After we've left the common fisheries policy, the two main pillars of the CFP will fall away. That's mutual access to waters and the EU allocation of quota. And I look forward, once we've taken back control, to the regrowth of our own fishing industry, particularly as I originally hail from Cornwall. All ministers are clear that leaving the EU means leaving the common agricultural policy and making our own decisions for our own farmers' benefit for the first time in around half a century.
Karen Smith.
The joint report in December talked about a mapping exercise about cross-border cooperation. I asked the Prime Minister, and I've written to the Prime Minister, to understand what this mapping exercise demonstrated. I've had a letter this week from Minister Baker telling me that I can't have the list of those 140 areas for the mapping exercise. Mr. Speaker, what do I, as a member of this Parliament, have to do to understand what those 140 areas are? I could go to the EU, I could go to the Irish Government, I could perhaps stand on the border and conduct my own survey. It's absolutely unacceptable for me as a member of Parliament to receive this letter.
Well, the Honourable Lady should have kept up with some of the events that have been happening in the last week or two. The chairman of the Brexit Select Committee wrote to me and indeed asked me again when I appeared in front of them whether they could have that list and the support for it, and we have said yes as soon as it's complete, as soon as we've cleared the release of it with the European Union themselves. who have, by the way, turned down FOIs on this subject, and that will be available as soon as it's complete.
When it comes to the future negotiations, we are clear that negotiations over trade must be separate from negotiations over access to waters. There would be no precedent to link the two, and we will continue to take this position in our negotiations on the economic partnership with the EU. The earlier statement referred to, joint statement from the SFF and NFFO, made the position clear, which is normal, and that is that total allowable catches, quota shares and access arrangements should be agreed through annual bilateral agreement.
Will my right friend confirm that when the so-called WAIB, the Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill, becomes law, we will be committing ourselves to the financial settlement which will be binding in international law? Does he therefore agree that we should seek to obtain as much detail as possible in the political declaration whilst we still have that leverage?
The first thing I'd say to my right honourable friend is, of course, what will be binding in international law is what's written into the withdrawal agreement. And therefore I would expect Parliament to have views on what conditions should be in it.
Currently, less than 1% of our non-EU exports and imports are manually checked. That means over 99% are processed through technological and electronic solutions. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that post-Brexit this is the way forward, despite the cynicism of some, including on the Irish border?
Well, Lady makes a very important point. I think it is important that we continue to look at all the technology investment we can make to make sure that our trade with the wider world is as frictionless as possible. And of course we need to look at those solutions with regard to the deal between the UK and the EU as well.
Carmichael.
Can the Secretary of State yet explain to the House how the transitional arrangements he has negotiated for our fishing industry will work in relation to the renegotiation of the EU-Norway Faroes deal on mackerel? Can he tell the House who will lead the negotiation and when it will happen?
Mr. Speaker, during the implementation period for the whole of 2019, we'll apply the agreement reached at the Fisheries Council in December 2018, where we would have been fully involved in this agreement as a former member state. For the 2019 negotiations that apply to 2020, we have agreed a process of bilateral consultation between the UK and the EU ahead of negotiations with coastal states in the Fisheries Council. From December 2020, we will be negotiating fishing opportunities as an independent coastal state.
Thank you. Order. Business question.